My wife says she's working late at that motel. Watch how her perfect little lie comes crashing down.
The silence in our Honda Civic was so thick you could cut it with a butter knife and serve it at a funeral. My wife Sarah sat in the passenger seat staring out the window like she was planning my homicide, while I gripped the steering wheel and tried not to think about how we'd gotten here. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone," she finally said, her voice dripping with the kind of venom that makes rattlesnakes seem cuddly. I almost laughed. Almost. "I embarrassed you? Sarah, our son just quit the basketball team because you screamed at him for missing a layup in front of the entire gym, including the college scouts. He needed to hear it. He's 17, not a Navy SEAL." Sarah turned to face me, and I could see her reflection in the side mirror, all sharp angles and righteous indignation. "You wouldn't understand, Tom. You never had any real ambition." There it was. The knife twisted just right. Sarah had this talent for finding your soft spots and pressing them like elevator buttons. Me, the guy who'd worked his way up from changing oil to owning 3 auto repair shops in our little Midwestern town of Millbrook. Yeah, real slacker material. "Right," I said, pulling into the driveway of the Henderson house, where we were supposed to pretend to be a happy couple at their anniversary party. "I forgot, making an honest living fixing cars doesn't count as ambition." "That's not what I meant." "Sure it isn't." The Henderson place was lit up like a Christmas tree, with cars lining both sides of Maple Street. Through the windows, I could see people laughing, dancing, and having the kind of fun that seemed as foreign to me as speaking Mandarin. When had Sarah and I stopped having fun together? When had everything become a competition? We walked up the front steps in hostile silence. Sarah had put on her public face, the one she wore to corporate events and PTA meetings, all smiles and charm. I knew better. Under that perfectly applied makeup was a woman who'd spent the last 3 months treating me like something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Tom, Sarah!" Linda Henderson appeared at the door, wine glass in hand, already tipsy. "So glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," Sarah said, slipping seamlessly into her role as the perfect wife. She even managed to sound sincere. The party was in full swing, the living room had been cleared for dancing, and couples swayed to some jazz number that probably cost more than my monthly insurance premium. I recognized most of the faces. Millbrook wasn't exactly a metropolis. There was Dr. Peterson from the clinic, the Johnsons from the hardware store, and, well, look what the cat dragged in. I turned to find Lena Morrison approaching us, her smile sharp enough to perform surgery. Lena worked with Sarah at Midwest Insurance Solutions, and if gossip were an Olympic sport, she'd have more gold medals than Michael Phelps. "Lena," I nodded. "How's the rumor mill treating you, Tom?" Sarah hissed under her breath. Lena's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, you know me. I just keep my ears open. Speaking of which, I heard about Jake quitting basketball. Such a shame. He had real potential." The way she said it made it clear she'd heard every detail of Sarah's public meltdown. In a town like Millbrook, news traveled faster than bad weather. "He'll be fine," I said. "Sometimes kids need to find their own path." "Of course," Lena agreed, but her eyes said something different. "Sarah, honey, you look like you could use a drink. Come on, let's get you something strong." And just like that, my wife was whisked away, leaving me standing alone in a room full of people who probably knew more about my family's business than I did. The joys of small-town living. I made my way to the kitchen, hoping to find something stronger than the fruit punch that was making the rounds. Instead, I found myself face-to-face with Andrei Volkov, a guy who drove taxi in town and had the kind of swagger that suggested he thought he was God's gift to womankind. "Tom," he said, like we were old buddies. "How's business?" "Can't complain." I grabbed a beer from the cooler, popping it open with more force than necessary. "You?" Good. Very busy lately. Lots of evening appointments." Something in his tone made me look at him more carefully. Andre was maybe 40, with the kind of build that suggested he spent serious time at the gym. His smile was all teeth and no warmth. "Evening appointments. You know how it is. People need rides to all sorts of places. Sometimes they don't want their cars seen in certain locations." He winked at me, and I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What the hell was he talking about? Before I could ask, Sarah appeared at my elbow. "Tom, we should dance." It wasn't a suggestion. She practically dragged me onto the makeshift dance floor where we swayed awkwardly to a song I didn't recognize. Up close, I could smell the wine on her breath and something else. a perfume I didn't recognize. Having fun? I asked. Trying to. She looked over my shoulder at something, and I turned to see Andre watching us from across the room. When our eyes met, he raised his beer in a mock salute. Friend of yours? I asked Sarah. What? Who? The taxi driver, Andre. Sarah's grip on my shoulder tightened slightly. I don't know what you're talking about. But she did. I could tell by the way she avoided my eyes, by the slight flush in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the wine. After 20 years of marriage, you learn to read the signs. The song ended, and Sarah stepped away like I'd suddenly caught fire. I need another drink. She disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there like an idiot. I was about to follow when I heard voices from the hallway. Sarah and Lena, talking in hushed tones. Can't keep doing this, Sarah was saying. Relax, Lena replied. He doesn't suspect anything. Men never do. But what if Jake finds out? What if Jake won't find out? And even if he did, what's he gonna do? He's 17, Sarah. Teen Sarah, he'll get over it. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart pounding. What wouldn't Jake get over? I just feel so guilty, Sarah continued. Tom's been trying so hard lately, and Tom's been trying. Lena's voice was sharp with disbelief. Honey, Tom gave up trying years ago. He's comfortable, settled, boring. You deserve better. I know, but nothing. You think he'd hesitate if he had the chance? Men are all the same, Sarah. They just hide it better. There was a long pause, and I held my breath. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd made different choices, Sarah said finally. It's not too late, Lena replied. You're still young, still beautiful. You could start over. With what? I'd lose everything in a divorce. Not everything, and think about what you'd gain. Freedom, excitement, a chance to be happy again. I'd heard enough. I slipped away from the wall and headed for the front door, my mind reeling. My wife was talking about divorce with her best friend, discussing me like I was some kind of obstacle to overcome. Outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I sat on the front steps trying to process what I'd just heard. 20 years of marriage, and Sarah was ready to throw it all away because I was boring. Because I was comfortable? The front door opened behind me, and I turned to see Jake, my son, emerging from the shadows of the porch. He looked as shell-shocked as I felt. Dad? Hey, buddy, what are you doing here? I thought you were staying at Mike's tonight. I was going to surprise Mom. Apologize for quitting the team. He sat down beside me, his voice hollow. I heard her talking to Mrs. Morrison. My heart sank. How much did you hear? Enough. He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the street. Dad, is she cheating on you? The question hit me like a physical blow. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he'd misunderstood, but the words stuck in my throat, because deep down I was starting to wonder the same thing. I don't know, Jake. We sat there in silence, father and son, both trying to figure out how our family had fallen apart without us noticing. The next morning, I woke up to an empty bed and the sound of Sarah's car pulling out of the driveway. No goodbye, no note, nothing. Just the lingering scent of that unfamiliar perfume on her pillow. Jake was already gone, too, probably avoiding the house and the tension that had become as much a part of our daily routine as morning coffee. I couldn't blame him. If I could avoid it, I would too. I made my way to the kitchen, where I found a note stuck to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a wrench, a gag gift from Jake last Christmas. Gone to work early, busy day, don't wait up, don't wait up. Like that was some kind of stranger she was being polite to. I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash, then immediately pulled it out and smoothed it flat. Evidence, maybe. Of what? I wasn't sure yet. My phone buzzed with a text from Yuri Petrov, my best friend and the owner of Millbrook's finest dive bar, the Grease Monkey. The name was my suggestion, a tribute to our shared automotive roots. Coffee, you look like you need it. I checked the time, 7:30 a.m. How did he know I needed coffee? Then I remembered, Yuri had been at the party last night. He'd probably seen me leave early, seen the look on my face. 20 minutes later, I was sitting in a booth at Mel's Diner, watching Yuri pour cream into his coffee with the precision of a chemist. Yuri was one of those guys who'd done a little bit of everything, cop, mechanic, bartender, and now philosopher in residence for anyone who needed to talk through their problems. So, he said, settling back in his seat, want to tell me why you looked like someone had run over your dog last night? That obvious, huh? Tom, I've seen happier faces at funerals. What's going on? I told him everything. The conversation I'd overheard, Sarah's strange behavior, the perfume, Andre's cryptic comments about evening appointments. Yuri listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or raising an eyebrow. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, stirring his coffee thoughtfully. You think she's cheating, he said finally. I don't know what to think. But you suspect, I nodded. The signs are all there, aren't they? The distance, the secrecy, the way she talks about me to Lena like I'm some kind of burden. Signs can be deceiving, Yuri said carefully, but they can also be warnings. What are you going to do about it? What can I do? Follow her around town like some kind of stalker? Hire a private investigator? This isn't a movie, Yuri. No, it's not. It's your life. And if your wife is cheating on you, you have a right to know. The bell above the diner door chimed, and I looked up to see Andrei Volkov walking in. He spotted us immediately and headed over, his trademark swagger in full effect. Tom, Yuri, mind if I join you? Before we could answer, he slid into the booth next to Yuri, signaling the waitress for coffee. Up close, he looked tired, with dark circles under his eyes and the kind of stubble that suggested he hadn't been home the night before. Rough night? Yuri asked, echoing my thoughts. Andrei grinned. The best kind. You know how it is when you're in demand, you don't get much sleep. In demand? I kept my voice neutral, but my hands were clenched under the table. The taxi business is booming, especially late-night calls. People don't want to drive themselves when they're compromised. Compromised how? You know, drunk, emotional, doing things they shouldn't be doing. His grin widened. Married people can be very generous tippers when they need discretion. I felt Yuri's foot kick mine under the table, a warning to stay calm. But staying calm was getting harder by the second. Must be interesting work, I managed. Oh, it is. You'd be surprised how many respectable people lead double lives. Take last night, for example. I had this fair, married woman, very proper, works at one of those insurance companies downtown. She needed a ride to the Riverside Motel. My blood turned to ice. Sarah worked at an insurance company downtown. The Riverside Motel was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Interesting, Yuri said, his voice carefully neutral. What time was this? Around 11. She was very nervous, kept checking her phone, paid me double to wait and drive her home afterward. Andrew's eyes met mine across the table. Funny thing is, I've been driving her there for months. Always the same time, always the same routine. The diner seemed to spin around me. I gripped the edge of the table, trying to keep my voice steady. Months? Oh yes, very regular customer. Always polite, always pays well. Though I have to say, she's been looking more stressed lately. Guilt, maybe. These married women, they start feeling bad about their little adventures after a while. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee cup, sending hot liquid spreading across the table. I have to go. Tom. Yuri started, but I was already heading for the door. Outside, I leaned against my truck, breathing hard. The morning air felt thick, like breathing through cotton. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Working late tonight? Don't wait up. Don't wait up. The same words she'd been using for months. How had I been so blind? Yuri appeared beside me, holding a handful of napkins. You okay? No, I'm not okay. My wife is cheating on me, and the guy she's cheating with just rubbed it in my face. You don't know for sure. Come on, Yuri. How much more evidence do I need? She's been distant for months. She's working late all the time, and now I find out she's been taking taxi rides to a motel. What else could it be? Yuri was quiet for a moment. What are you going to do? I looked back at the diner, where Andrei was probably still sitting in our booth, enjoying his little performance. I'm going to find out the truth, and then I'm going to make them regret it. The words came out harder than I'd intended, but I meant them. I'd spent 20 years building a life with Sarah, working my buttocks off to provide for our family, being the reliable, boring husband she apparently didn't want anymore. If she thought she could just discard me like an old transmission, she was about to learn otherwise. Yuri studied my face. Tom, be careful. When you go looking for revenge, you better dig 2 graves. Maybe I will, I said, but I guarantee you I won't be the one lying in both of them. That evening, I told Jake I was working late at the shop and drove to the parking lot across from Midwest Insurance Solutions. Sarah's Honda was still in its usual spot, along with a few other cars belonging to people who apparently also worked late on a regular basis. I settled in to wait, feeling like a character in one of those detective novels Jake used to read. The irony wasn't lost on me. Here I was, a guy who fixed cars for a living, playing amateur private investigator because my wife couldn't be bothered to fix our marriage. At exactly 10:45, Sarah emerged from the building. Even from a distance, I could see she'd changed clothes. Gone was the conservative business suit she'd worn to work that morning. Instead, she wore a black dress I'd never seen before, and heels that clicked against the pavement as she walked to her car. She drove slowly through downtown Millbrook, checking her mirrors frequently. I followed at a distance, my heart pounding like I was 16 again and sneaking out of the house. When she turned into the parking lot of Murphy's Bar, I pulled over and watched from across the street. Murphy's wasn't the kind of place Sarah usually frequented. It was a working-class bar, the kind of place where guys like me went to drink beer and complain about their problems. What was she doing there? I didn't have to wait long to find out. A yellow taxi pulled into the lot, and Andre got out. He was dressed better than usual, dark jeans and a button-down shirt that showed off his gym-built physique. He looked around the parking lot, spotted Sarah's Honda, and walked into the bar. 5 minutes later, they emerged together. Sarah was laughing at something he'd said, her hand resting on his arm. They got into his taxi, and I watched my wife of 20 years drive away with another man. I followed them through the quiet streets of Millbrook, staying back far enough to avoid detection, but close enough to see where they were going. When the taxi turned into the parking lot of the Riverside Motel, I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. The Riverside was exactly what you'd expect from a place that advertised hourly rates on a neon sign. The kind of establishment where the sheets were questionable and the clientele didn't want to be recognized. I watched Andre park near room 237, watched Sarah get out of the taxi like she'd done this 100 times before. She had done this 100 times before. Months, Andre had said. This wasn't some impulsive mistake or moment of weakness. This was a full-blown affair, complete with regular meeting times and established routines. I sat in my truck, engine running, trying to decide what to do next. Part of me wanted to march over there and kick down the door, confront them both, and end this charade once and for all. But another part of me, the part that had learned patience from 20 years of dealing with difficult customers and stubborn engines, told me to wait. Evidence. That's what I needed. Not just my word against theirs, but proof that couldn't be denied or explained away. I took out my phone and started taking pictures. The taxi in the motel parking lot. Sarah walking into room 237. The timestamp showing it was nearly midnight on a Tuesday, when she was supposed to be working late. An hour later, they emerged. Sarah looked different, disheveled in a way that made my stomach turn. She kissed Andre goodbye. Not a quick peck, but a real kiss. The kind she used to give me when we were dating. I followed the taxi back to Murphy's, where Sarah got in her Honda and drove home. I waited 10 minutes, then headed home myself, my mind racing with plans and possibilities. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway. Sarah's car was already there, and I could see a light on in our bedroom window. By the time I got inside, she was in the bathroom, running the shower. "Tom," she called out when she heard me come upstairs. "You're home late." "Yeah, I had a problem with the Morrison account. Took longer than expected." I know the feeling. We had a crisis at the office. I just got home myself. The lie came so easily, so naturally, that I wondered how many others I'd missed over the months. How many late nights at the office were actually late nights at the Riverside Motel? I lay in bed that night listening to Sarah's breathing, wondering if she was really asleep or just pretending. When had we become strangers sharing a bed? When had our marriage become nothing more than an elaborate performance? My phone buzzed with a text from Yuri. "You okay? Haven't heard from you." I typed back, "Found what I was looking for. Now I need to figure out what to do about it." His response came immediately. "Want to talk? Tomorrow. I need to think." But thinking was the last thing I wanted to do. Thinking meant acknowledging that my marriage was over, that the woman lying next to me had chosen someone else, that 20 years of my life had been reduced to a lie. Instead, I stared at the ceiling and planned my revenge. The next day, I did something I'd never done in 20 years of marriage. I called in sick to work and spent the day following my wife. Sarah left the house at her usual time, dressed in her usual conservative business attire. She drove to her office, parked in her usual spot, and walked into the building like she did every morning. From the outside, everything looked perfectly normal. But I'd learned not to trust appearances. I parked across the street and settled in to wait. At 10:30, Sarah emerged from the building with Lena Morrison. They got into Lena's car and drove to the Millbrook Mall, where they spent 2 hours shopping. I watched them through the windows of Victoria's Secret, saw Sarah holding up lingerie that definitely wasn't for my benefit. They had lunch at the food court, heads together, whispering like teenagers, sharing secrets. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see Lena's animated gestures, the way she kept glancing around to make sure no one was listening. At 2 o'clock, they returned to the office. Sarah went inside while Lena drove away. I was about to leave when I saw Lena's car circle back and park behind the building. 5 minutes later, Sarah appeared at the back exit, looked around nervously, and got into Lena's car. I followed them to a coffee shop on the other side of town, where they met with someone I didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with short gray hair and an expensive suit. They talked for nearly an hour, the gray-haired woman taking notes on a legal pad. A lawyer. Sarah was meeting with a divorce lawyer. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This wasn't just an affair, it was an exit strategy. Sarah wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning to leave me. And from the look of things, she'd been planning it for a while. I drove home in a daze, my mind reeling with the implications. How long had she been planning this? What had she told the lawyer about me, about our marriage, about our finances? Was I about to lose everything I'd worked for? Jake was in the kitchen when I got home, making a sandwich with the kind of concentration that suggested he was avoiding something. "Hey, Dad, thought you were working today." Took the day off, feeling a little under the weather. He looked at me more closely. "You look terrible. Maybe you should see a doctor." "I'm fine, just need some rest." But I wasn't fine, and we both knew it. I could see the worry in Jake's eyes, the way he kept glancing toward the front door, like he expected his mother to walk in at any moment. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Sure. Are you and Mom getting divorced?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke. I wanted to lie, to tell him everything was fine, that his parents were just going through a rough patch. But Jake was 17, not 7. He deserved the truth. "I don't know, son. Maybe." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. "It's because of what we heard at the party, isn't it? About Mom and that taxi driver." "Partly. I'm sorry, Dad. This is my fault. If I hadn't quit the basketball team, if I hadn't made Mom so angry—" "Stop." I put my hand on his shoulder. "This has nothing to do with you, Jake. This is between your mother and me. You didn't cause this, and you can't fix it. But maybe if I talk to her—" "No. This is adult business, and adults have to handle it." He was quiet for a moment, staring at his sandwich like it held the answers to life's problems. "What happens to me if you guys get divorced?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, where do I live? Do I have to choose between you and Mom?" The pain in his voice nearly broke my heart. This was what Sarah's affair had really cost us. Not just our marriage, but our son's sense of security. His faith in the idea that families were supposed to stick together. "We'll figure it out," I said. "Whatever happens, you'll be okay. I promise." But even as I said the words, I wondered if I could keep that promise. If Sarah was planning to divorce me, if she was working with a lawyer to take half of everything I'd built, what would be left for Jake? That evening, Sarah came home at her usual time, acting like nothing had happened. She kissed my cheek, asked about my day, and started making dinner like she was still the devoted wife and mother. "How was work?" I asked, watching her face carefully. "Busy. We're dealing with a major claim, and it's taking up all my time." "Lena helping out?" "Of course. She's been invaluable." "I'll bet she has," I thought. "Must be nice having such a good friend." Sarah glanced at me sharply. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing. Just that it's good to have people you can trust." "Yes," she said slowly. "It is." We ate dinner in relative silence, making small talk about Jake's plans for college and the weather forecast. Normal conversation between a normal married couple, except nothing about us was normal anymore. After dinner, Sarah announced she had to go back to the office. "Again?" Jake asked. "Mom, you've been working late every night this week." "I know, honey, but this claim is really important. If we don't handle it right, the company could lose a lot of money." "What kind of claim?" I asked. Sarah hesitated. "It's confidential. You know I can't discuss specifics." "Of course. Wouldn't want to break any rules." She stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Did I know something? Was I suspicious? How much could she get away with? "I should be home by 11, she said finally. I'll wait up." You need your rest. You still look sick. After she left, Jake and I sat in the living room, pretending to watch television. But neither of us was really paying attention to the screen. We were both thinking about the same thing, the woman who used to be the center of our family and had become a stranger. Dad? Yeah? Whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm on your side. I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had he gotten so tall, so mature? When had he stopped being a kid and started being a young man who understood that sometimes the world was unfair and people you loved could disappoint you? Thanks, Jake. That means more than you know. At 11:30, Sarah's car pulled into the driveway. I listened to her footsteps on the stairs, heard her moving around in the bathroom, getting ready for bed. When she slipped under the covers beside me, she smelled like soap and that unfamiliar perfume. How was the office? I asked in the darkness. Fine. We made good progress on the claim. That's good. Glad you're getting things sorted out. Yes, she whispered. I am. But I knew she wasn't talking about work anymore. She was talking about us, about the lawyer she'd met with, about the plans she was making for a life that didn't include me. Two could play that game. The next morning, I called Yuri and asked him to meet me at the shop. I needed advice, and Yuri was one of the few people I trusted completely. Plus, his years as a cop had given him insights into human nature that I was going to need. I found him in my office, drinking coffee from a mug that said, World's Okayest Mechanic, another gift from Jake. You look like hell, he said by way of greeting. Feel like it too. I sat down across from him and told him everything, the surveillance, the motel, the meeting with the lawyer. Yuri listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. So she's not just cheating, he said when I finished. She's planning to take you to the cleaners. Looks that way. What are you going to do about it? That's what I need to figure out. I can't just sit back and let her destroy everything I've worked for. Yuri leaned back in his chair, thinking. You need a lawyer. A good one. I know. But I also need more than that. I need to know what she's planning, what she's told her lawyer, what kind of case she thinks she has. You want to fight dirty. I want to protect myself and my son. If that means fighting dirty, then yeah. Yuri nodded slowly. I might be able to help with that. I still have some contacts from my police days. People who owe me favors. What kind of favors? The kind that involve finding out things people don't want you to know. Before I could ask what he meant, the shop door opened, and Jake walked in. He looked around nervously like he was afraid of being caught somewhere he shouldn't be. Dad, can I talk to you? Of course. What's up? He glanced at Yuri, then back at me. It's about Mom. I found something. My blood went cold. What did you find? Jake pulled out his phone and showed me a screenshot of a text message. I was using Mom's laptop last night to work on a school project, and her phone was synced to it. This message popped up. I read the message and felt the world tilt sideways. Can't wait to see you tonight. Room 237 as usual. Make sure Tom doesn't suspect anything. Love you. A. There were others, Jake said quietly alone. Lots of them. Going back months. I handed the phone to Yuri, who read the message and whistled low. Well, that's pretty damning evidence. I'm sorry, Dad, Jake said. I didn't want to find this, but when I saw it, I couldn't pretend I hadn't. You did the right thing, I told him, though my voice sounded strange to my own ears. This isn't your fault, Jake. None of this is your fault. What are you going to do? I looked at Yuri, who nodded slightly. We're going to make sure your mother doesn't get away with this. We? Jake, how would you feel about helping us gather some more evidence? My son's eyes hardened in a way that reminded me of myself. What do you need me to do? For the next hour, we planned our strategy. Jake would continue monitoring Sarah's messages, being careful not to let her know he was doing it. Yuri would use his contacts to find out what Sarah had told her lawyer and what kind of divorce settlement she was hoping for. And I would document everything, every lie, every secret meeting, every night she claimed to be working late. This is going to get ugly, Yuri warned. Once you start down this path, there's no going back. She started down this path when she decided to cheat on me and planned to take half of everything I own, I replied. I'm just going to finish it. That afternoon, I paid a visit to Margaret Chen, the best divorce lawyer in Millbrook. Her office was in one of the newer buildings downtown, all glass and steel and modern furniture that probably cost more than most people made in a month. Margaret was a small woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper reputation. She'd handled some of the messiest divorces in town, and her clients usually came out ahead. Tom, she said, shaking my hand, I have to say, I'm surprised to see you here. Why is that? Well, your wife was in here just yesterday. She seemed to think you were completely oblivious to her extracurricular activities. I felt a surge of satisfaction. Sarah had underestimated me, just like she'd been doing for years. What did she tell you? I can't discuss the specifics of another client's case, but I can tell you that she seemed very confident about her position. She seems to think she'll get half of your business assets, plus alimony and primary custody of Jake. And what do you think about her chances? Margaret smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. That depends entirely on what kind of evidence you have. I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from the motel, the screenshots of the text messages Jake had found, the documentation of Sarah's lies about working late. Margaret's smile grew wider as she reviewed the evidence. Oh, this changes things considerably. Your wife may have made a serious miscalculation. What do you mean? In cases of cheating, especially when there's clear evidence of deception and planning to defraud a spouse, the courts tend to be much less sympathetic to the cheating party. Instead of getting half of everything, she might be lucky to get anything at all. And Jake? With evidence like this, plus his age and his clear preference to live with you, custody shouldn't be an issue. I felt a weight lift off my shoulders for the first time in weeks. So what's our next step? We gather more evidence, document everything, and prepare for war. Because that's what this is going to be, Tom. Your wife has been planning to ambush you. Now we're going to ambush her instead. As I left Margaret's office, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: hope. Sarah thought she was so clever, so careful in her planning. She thought I was just a boring, predictable husband who would roll over and let her take everything. She was about to learn how wrong she was. 2 weeks later, our plan was ready. Jake had been monitoring Sarah's messages and had discovered that she and Andre met every Tuesday and Friday night at the Riverside Motel. Yuri's police contacts had confirmed that Sarah was planning to file for divorce within the month, claiming irreconcilable differences and asking for half of my business assets. What she didn't know was that we were ready for her. You sure about this? Yuri asked as we sat in his car outside Murphy's bar on a Friday night. Once we do this, there's no taking it back. I'm sure. Jake was in the back seat holding a video camera we'd borrowed from his friend Mike. His hands were steady, but I could see the tension in his face. This wasn't easy for any of us, but it was necessary. At exactly 10:45, Sarah's Honda pulled into the parking lot. She was wearing the black dress again, the one I'd never seen before her affair started. A few minutes later, Andre's taxi arrived. There they are, Jake said quietly. We watched them go through their usual routine: the meeting at Murphy's, the drive to the motel, the walk to room 237. Jake filmed everything, his camera steady despite the circumstances. Now we wait, I said. An hour later, they emerged from the motel room. This time, instead of their usual quick goodbye, they stood by Andre's taxi talking. Their voices carried across the parking lot in the still night air. I can't keep doing this much longer, Sarah was saying. Tom's getting suspicious. So leave him, Andre replied. You said you were going to file for divorce. I am. My lawyer says I should wait another few weeks, make sure I have everything documented properly. If I do this right, I'll get half of everything. And then we can be together? Yes. Once the divorce is final and I get my settlement, we can start over. Maybe move somewhere else where people don't know us. Jake's camera caught every word, every gesture, evidence that this wasn't just an affair, but a conspiracy to defraud me in the divorce proceedings. Did you get all that? I whispered. Every word, Jake replied. We followed them back to Murphy's, where Sarah got in her Honda and drove home. But instead of following her, we followed Andre to his apartment complex on the other side of town. What are we doing? Jake asked. Your mother isn't the only one with secrets, I said. Yuri's police contacts had done some digging into Andre's background. It turned out our friendly neighborhood taxi driver had a few legal issues: unpaid child support, a suspended license from a DUI conviction, and a small but steady side business selling marijuana to college kids. The suspended license is the key, Yuri had explained. He's not supposed to be driving at all, let alone operating a taxi. One anonymous tip to the DMV, and his whole operation shuts down. But we had something better than an anonymous tip. We had video evidence of him conducting his taxi business while driving on a suspended license. As we watched Andre park his taxi and head into his apartment building, I felt a grim satisfaction. Sarah and her lover had been so careful to hide their affair, but they'd been careless about everything else. Phase 2, I said. The next morning, I made 3 phone calls. The first was to the DMV, reporting a taxi driver operating without a valid license. The second was to the IRS, reporting suspected tax evasion by a cash-only business. The third was to Child Protective Services, reporting that a man who owed thousands in child support was operating an illegal taxi business. By noon, Andre's taxi had been impounded, and he was facing a stack of legal problems that would keep him busy for months. Sarah came home that evening in a foul mood. She'd tried calling Andre several times throughout the day, but his phone went straight to voicemail. "Everything okay?" I asked innocently. "Fine," she snapped. "Just work stuff." "Anything I can help with?" "No, you wouldn't understand." That night, Sarah tried calling Andre again. When he finally answered, I could hear his voice through the phone from across the room. He was angry, panicked, talking about lawyers and court dates and having to find money to pay fines. Sarah's face went white as she listened. "What do you mean, suspended license? You never told me." She caught me watching and took the phone into the bathroom, closing the door behind her. But the damage was done. I could see the fear in her eyes, the realization that her carefully laid plans were falling apart. Over the next few days, Sarah became increasingly agitated. She snapped at Jake over minor things, stayed late at work even when she wasn't meeting Andre, and spent hours on the phone with Lena, whispering about problems and setbacks. "She knows something's wrong," Jake observed one evening after Sarah had gone to bed early with a headache. "Good," I said. "Let her worry. Let her wonder what's going wrong with her perfect plan. Dad, are you enjoying this?" The question caught me off guard. Was I enjoying it? The planning, the surveillance, the slow destruction of Sarah's affair and divorce strategy? Maybe a little, I admitted. Is that wrong? Jake considered this. "I don't think so. She hurt you. She hurt our family. She deserves whatever happens to her." My son's words should have worried me. The fact that a 17-year-old was talking about revenge and consequences should have been a red flag. But all I felt was pride that he understood what was at stake, that he was willing to stand with me against the woman who had betrayed us both. "One more week," I told him. "Then we spring the trap." The confrontation came on a Tuesday evening. Sarah had announced she was working late again. But thanks to Jake's monitoring of her messages, we knew she was actually meeting with her lawyer to finalize the divorce papers. I was waiting in the living room when she got home at nearly midnight. "Tom, what are you doing up?" "Waiting for you. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have warned her, because she went very still. "About what?" "About your late nights at the office. About your friend Andre. About the divorce papers you filed today." The color drained from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about." I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos from the Riverside Motel. "Really?" "Because I have quite a bit of evidence that says otherwise." Sarah sank into the chair across from me, her hands shaking. "Tom, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain why you've been cheating on me for months? Can you explain why you've been planning to divorce me and take half of everything I've worked for? Can you explain why you've been lying to our son?" "It's not what you think. It's exactly what I think." I showed her the video Jake had taken, the audio of her conversation with Andre about the divorce settlement. "You've been planning this for months, Sarah. The affair, the divorce, the whole thing." She was crying now, but I felt no sympathy. These weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration that her plan had been discovered. "I was going to tell you," she said weakly. "When? After you'd taken half my business? After you'd destroyed our family? I never meant for it to happen. It just did." "Nonsense." The word came out harder than I'd intended, but I didn't care. "You made choices, Sarah. You chose to cheat. You chose to lie, and you chose to plan my destruction. Now you get to live with the consequences." "What consequences?" I smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Well, let's see. Your boyfriend, Andre, is facing charges for driving on a suspended license, tax evasion, and failure to pay child support. He's looking at possible jail time. Your divorce papers are going to be contested with evidence of cheating, which means instead of getting half of everything, you'll be lucky to get anything, and Jake has decided he wants to live with me full time." "You can't do this to me." "I'm not doing anything to you, Sarah. I'm just making sure the truth comes out." She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. "You're not the man I married." "You're right. The man you married was naive enough to trust you. The man you married would have rolled over and let you destroy him. But that man is gone, Sarah. You ended him. Jake appeared in the doorway, still in his pajamas. Mom, Dad, what's going on? Sarah looked at our son, and for a moment, I thought she might try to manipulate him, to make him choose sides. But something in Jake's expression must have warned her off. Your father and I are getting divorced, she said quietly. I know, Jake replied. I've known for weeks. Jake, I'm going to live with Dad, he said firmly. I don't want to see you anymore. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She looked from Jake to me, and I could see the moment when she realized she'd lost everything, her marriage, her son, her financial security, even her lover. This isn't over, she said, standing up. Yes, it is, I replied. It's been over for months. You just didn't bother to tell me. Sarah went upstairs to pack a bag. An hour later, she was gone, driving away from the life she'd tried to destroy. Jake and I stood at the window, watching her taillights disappear down the street. You okay? I asked him. Yeah, he said. Are you? I thought about it. Was I okay? My marriage was over, my family was broken, and the woman I'd loved for 20 years had turned out to be a stranger. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. Yeah, I said, I think I am. The divorce proceedings took 3 months. Sarah tried to fight the evidence, tried to claim the photos and videos were fake, tried to paint me as a controlling husband who had driven her to cheat. But Margaret Chen was as good as her reputation suggested, and the evidence was overwhelming. In the end, Sarah got nothing. No alimony, no share of my business, no custody of Jake. The judge was particularly harsh in his ruling, noting that Sarah's deliberate deception and planning made her actions especially egregious. Andre plea bargained his way out of jail time, but lost his taxi license permanently. He left town shortly after the divorce was finalized, and I never saw him again. Lena Morrison tried to distance herself from the whole situation, claiming she'd just been a supportive friend. But Jake had screenshots of messages where she'd actively encouraged Sarah's affair and helped plan the divorce strategy. She ended up losing her job at the insurance company and had to move to another town to find work. As for me and Jake, we rebuilt our lives piece by piece. He went back to playing basketball, made it onto the varsity team, and started getting interest from college scouts again. I expanded my business, opening a 4th location and hiring more mechanics. We never talked about Sarah much after the divorce was final. She tried to contact Jake a few times, sending letters and cards on his birthday and holidays. He threw them away without reading them. Do you miss her? He asked me one evening as we worked on his car in the garage. I miss who I thought she was, I said, but that person never really existed. Do you think you'll ever get married again? Maybe someday, but not for a long time. I need to remember who I am when I'm not trying to save a marriage that was already dead. Jake nodded like he understood. At 18, he was wiser than I'd been at 30. 6 months after the divorce was final, I got a call from Yuri. Sarah had been arrested for embezzling money from her new job at an insurance company in Chicago. Apparently, old habits died hard. Karma's an unpleasant person, Yuri said. Yeah, I agreed. It is. I hung up the phone and went back to work. I had a business to run, a son to raise, and a life to rebuild. Sarah was no longer my problem. For the first time in years, I was exactly where I wanted to be. The end.